Like some people think that they get addicted to the grind and then they don't relax and rejuvenate. When my partners died, I was exhausted and I was less productive, spending more time getting less done. So if you don't have an ability to have relaxation, rejuvenation, or recreation, then what happens is everything gets stifled: creativity, productivity, enjoyment. And so all five of those things are part of our rich life. It doesn't mean all five are perfect. It just means that we're intentional about it and that we have depth. It means we have choice. We write the script. We don't let the world write the script, because the world will just tell you more is better and you can never have enough. And that lie keeps people in dissonance so that they are enslaved to their work, they're enslaved to their career, they're enslaved to their money, and they don't have freedom.
Garrett Gunderson, it is a pleasure to welcome you to the Inner Entrepreneur podcast.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Well, I really appreciate you coming along. I've been binging on some of your material recently over the past couple of days in preparation for this, and I'm always trying to think, how do I describe a guest? And I can go author, speaker, financial educator. It would kind of drop into the category of how I would describe a lot of my guests. And then I thought, no, this guy's a little bit more than that. He's obsessed. He's obsessed. So that was my feeling from coming away, that you seem to have an absolute passion and an obsession for financial education. Is that a fair description?
Definitely. I think a lot of it comes from, I mean, my family didn't know a lot about money, and neither did I. And new money always makes bad mistakes. They just do. It's just like, I was meeting with my friend of, like, I guess it's been over 20 years. He's been an attorney of mine. And we just recounted like all the new money mistakes that we made over our lifetime, and you just think of all these people that cost them so much. And if they're confused about money, it really has a consequence over their entire life, their energy, their lifestyle. I mean, a lot of people list it as a reason for divorce. It's if it's confusing and complex, then people kind of check out. It's like, I've just seen so many people that when they can master it versus have money be their master, life gets so much better. It just does. And I don't love looking at spreadsheets. I'm more of a philosopher. I can look at the spreadsheets. There's other people that are definitely better at that than me, but to understand like the methodologies and the frameworks and the mindset and the energy, like that stuff really matters. But I'm also really practical, like save on tax and improve cash flow and, create financial fitness where your financial house is in order. So I kind of feel like I can blend those two things. And part of it's because I've just done some dumb stuff. I mean, in my 20s, I made some pretty bad errors around money, like chasing it and saying yes to too many things, being overextended with a lot of leverage and in the financial world. And, but I was also like curious and always questioning. And I just had this commitment. I want to figure out what's right, not who's right. Like sometimes it was like my own ego in my early years, because I started in 98, 99. The market was amazing. I'm just putting clients in the market thinking I'm brilliant. And then 2000 comes and I realized, oh, I don't really know what the hell I'm doing. And I had to tell people that, which was pretty humbling. I was pretty much an arrogant dick at the time. So that was really hard to say, oops. But it really shaped my entire career from there.
I love when Keith Cunningham says, "Would you rather be rich or right?"
I remember I was speaking at this event, 2008, 2007, maybe, had the self-published version of my book, Killing Sacred Cows. And he's in the back of the room reading through the book, and he just starts yelling out, "Love the title, man." Like, I'm in, just pumping me up, making me feel good. So we talked afterwards. I just like his no BS approach to things. And yeah, he's so smart, and I really like his content.
Well, he's really smart. But what I love about listening to him, very much like yourself, is that he's talking from practical experience. So this is not, by the way, I've spent the last 10 years studying this in Harvard, and I now have a, list of letters after my name. This is, I messed up royally. You think you've messed up? No, no, no. I messed up, and these are the lessons I've learned. You started off by saying, about the mistakes of new money, and the two questions I want to ask you about that is that, well, first, obviously, I need to know what those mistakes are. I reckon I'm a little bit older than you, but I'm still really good at making mistakes. So I want to know what some of those new money mistakes are. But the other thing is, it seemed, I think these money lessons we need to learn are really important whether or not we have a lot of money. Because I think that the reality is there will be some people who listen to this show who are high net worth people.
Mhm.
And we know statistically that there will be a mass amount of people who aren't but aspire to be financially independent. So what are the new money mistakes, and do they apply to everybody, or do they just apply to people who've actually made some money?
It's there's different issues. People that haven't made money, they have a different problem. They have a different viewpoint. Like I think part of it is they just don't value themselves enough.
Yeah.
They just don't find themselves worthy enough. And I know that seems really kind of like calloused and direct, but it's true. People, I have a friend that always says, you don't get what you deserve, you get what you think you deserve. And I think that there's so many people that just don't feel like they deserve it, that that's for someone else, or they have these misnomers and myths in their mind, like that somehow. I mean, you got to think about it. Like money has really bad advertising. Every documentary is about dirty, filthy, stinking. Every movie about Wall Street, not inspiring. It's about, Wall Street was a movie about legalized white collar crime, and Boiler Room was legalized white collar crime and drugs and Ben Affleck. I mean, it's just like there's just all these like negative connotations. And I wouldn't trust Wall Street with any other brand, and somehow we're supposed to trust our money with it. So a lot of times people that haven't made a lot of money say they don't have the time, they don't have the skill, or that it takes money to make money. And so they feel defeated and deflated. And so they kind of push it away because somehow they're making a judgment of it, and that judgment prevents them from progress. Whereas people that start making money, new money, like I'm a first generation entrepreneur. My dad was a coal miner. My grandfathers were coal miners. My great grandfather was a coal miner. I just didn't really understand that not everybody keeps their word, and that a lot of people might be hanging on and taking what they can and not adding and contributing. And it was convenience of relationships versus quality of relationships early on in my career. Hired a lot of friends, just didn't take the time. And when investments came, they sounded good, and I didn't really know how to do real due diligence, and I didn't know how to understand whether it would work out or not, because there's really good salespeople in the world of investments where they might be selling some deal, but they don't know the details of like why that deal might work and how to handle a rough economy. And so I think that the big thing is new money says yes far too often, and old money says no a lot more. And old money kind of looks and says, what would happen if the economy changed, and what's the staying power, and what's the track record, and is this something that I have any degree of knowledge or control? See, that I think like old money thinks a little bit more about control than new money. New money thinks I'm going to hand it off, it's going to come back with a whole bunch of money because I believe the story, and it ends up costing them a whole lot. So everything from the relationships, and I think I could narrow it down to, for both sides, an equation. I call it the value equation. It's just our mental capital, which is our idea, knowledge, wisdom. It's our insights, it's strategies and tools, combined with our relationship capital, the people, networks, mentors, friends, family, employees. It's our mental capital and how effectively we deliver that through serving others, solving problems, and adding value, because dollars follow value. And when we get to a place in money where it's devoid of value, meaning I'm trying to grow my money, but I'm not growing myself, I don't grow my understanding, I don't grow my knowledge, that's risk. That gap is called risk. And new money takes on far too much risk because they erroneously believe high risk equals high return. Old money realizes mitigating risk, protecting the capital and the principal, focusing on everything from cash flow or influence, that what happens is they actually increase their degree of safety by mitigating risk. And that's two very radically different philosophies. Most of the world's trained to think it takes money to make money, that high risk equals high return, and that you're in it for the long haul. So it's devoid of responsibility and accountability. They set their money aside and wait for 30 years and hope for the best, where, old money's more saying, how do we establish a business, or how do we establish an investment philosophy, and how do we establish an incredible team? They're going to have great attorneys. They're going to have people that do due diligence. I learned this in my early 20s. I went to shadow someone that was presenting a $400 million transaction. And I mean, this is crazy for me to watch. And the client wasn't in the room. There was just a family office. It was just a firm that only worked for that one really wealthy family. And they were picking the strategy apart. They were asking about ownership. They're talking about downside. It was almost exhausting and overwhelming, but also fascinating. And I left that room and I was like, hey, tell me more about this. And he's like, oh, that's a family office. And they represent the client. There's other family offices that take on more than one client, and you might only have to be worth 30 million. And I was like, 30 million? I'm in my early 20s. I didn't know anyone worth $30 million. And I was like, oh, there's a totally opposite set of rules, not different, opposite, set of rules. I mean, Billionaires, they use other people's money, they use other people's time, they use other people's ability, and they create massive vision and they continue to expand the vision. New money is like, I'm going to hustle, I'm going to grind, I'm going to work, I'm going to do all that I can, and often tries to save money by not having good legal counsel or not having a robust team that can save them. I see some of these athletes that did really well. Like there's a story about Magic Johnson. He just started to talk to the people that were in the front row or in the second row that were attorneys and that were business moguls. And he became a billionaire because he had an amazing team. Obviously, he built a huge brand, but that team helped to protect, preserve, and perpetuate that wealth. Where other people come to the money, and I used to work with athletes. I don't anymore. I don't have the time or the patience, or they're just getting hit up with so many ideas because people see them as having money, but they don't really know how to discern opportunity from distraction and do real due diligence. So I'm like a wind-up doll. You ask one question and I just keep going, But you asked two questions, so I went really long.
I did ask two questions, and I can't even remember what the two questions now are. But there's lots in there. One of the things that strikes me about old money and new money is, I say new money. New money are those people trying to create money in life. So there's an energy to that. There's a desperation. I mean, there's also an eagerness and there's an enthusiasm. But when you're desperate for something, you're grasping, and you'll almost take anything. Old money has made money. Now, it probably also means that a lot of the mistakes that you and I have learned, they've learned that generations ago.
Right.
They now have wealth and they're looking to grow that wealth. And I think there's two states of mind. One is the state of mind of acquiring wealth, and one state of mind is keeping wealth. And they've probably dropped into that second state of mind, is that the first and most important thing to them is maintaining the wealth they have, and the second thing is growing in that wealth.
Yeah. So there's
So
really three skill sets we're talking about here, Paul. Like the first skill set is making money. That's a skill
yeah,
set, right?
which is what most people are interested in.
Right.
How do I make money?
But some people make a lot of money and have nothing to show for it as far as financially. They might have like stuff, but they don't really have, financial wherewithal or staying power. The second thing is, how do you keep more of the money you make? Part of
Mm,
that is saving on tax. Part of that's, how you
mm,
handle the interest rates that you pay. Part of it's the fees and downside protection with investments. Part of it's how you design insurance and mitigate risk. And then it's how do you grow your money? And so I early on didn't really think about what I loved to do when it came to investing. I just thought anything that was an investment I should consider. So I had two IPOs I invested in. I invested in an oil and gas project. I invested in a hard money bridge financing fund and initiated that. And then what that meant was I had no time for my family, and it started to, start to suffocate my business because I was focused at so many things, on so many calls, had so many meetings of things I didn't want to do. Like I just was doing it because I'm like, oh, rich people have real estate, I should do real estate. There's nothing about real estate that I was really unique in or fascinated by, because it meant I was looking at spreadsheets. It meant I was talking to bankers, attorneys, accountants, property managers, maintenance people. Like none of those people were inspiring me. I wasn't inspiring them. It was very transactional, not very relational. And so I acquired over 100 properties that then took over my life. I had to hire full-time employees. I had, and it was like I'd be sitting with my family at the Super Bowl and we'd have an issue with a tenant, and all of a sudden that's on me. And look, I get that there's ways to hire that out, but it was just complicated in my 20s. And I found myself working hard just to lose money. Because yes, I grew from 1998 to 2008. I grew my net worth to $8 million. But you can't spend net worth. I can't take my net worth into a store. I don't wear it around to show people what it is. It's kind of this internal dialogue a lot of people focus on. I wasn't focused enough on cash flow. And so in 2008 and 2009, my net worth drastically decreased basically to zero. And now I have this mess to clean up because I was investing in things outside of my investor DNA. My investor DNA is, what do I value? What are my competencies where I am wanting to learn, where I have certain skills, and where do I have drivers that I'm interested in, where I would want to talk about, study. And when I write books, I get obsessed. I love it. I'm in that process. I'm getting up early to write. Like I look at my books as a piece of real estate, and that's a piece of real estate that actually I've had, thousands of conversations with people because of. I've had hugs, I've had notes. It's just like, it's still more meaningful, but nobody taught me that. I was just had to go through and make the mistakes and be like, well, what is that I really want to do? And I was recently meeting with a friend who knows that I have an amount of wealth, and he was asking a lot of questions. And when I told him everything I did and showed him where all my money is, he's like, but this is so simple. I'm like, and life is better and I feel wealthier because I can be more present. because I'm
Mm.
not overwhelmed. I'm not distracted. And I can just grow things that I want to grow, not things that I feel like I have to manage.
It's interesting you say that because I'm sometimes conscious that I invest very, very, very simply. And I have no doubt that if I was to put more time into it or more thought into it, that I could get a better return. And I've come to realize I get older that that I have a sufficient return. I have a sufficient return. Therefore, what I want now is peace, time, and freedom. And that's what. So you can't put a number on that, but that's what's most valuable to me. Um, and that seems like a very important point you're making there. That people invest based on what they think will give them the best return, but they're not taking it. That return is a percent as opposed to how is it impacting on my life. That's what I think you're saying there.
Yeah, because imagine that someone brings you a 20% investment. That's a really amazing return. But if when you make that investment, you start losing sleep because you don't really know how it works and you're not sure
Mm,
if it's going to work, and now you're uncertain, that robs you of you being your greatest asset, your ability to produce more value, your ability to have that peace of mind. It might impact your health, it might impact your relationships. I might be grouchier because of it because I'm now in concern, and scarcity destroys wealth. So if we invest in a place that creates scarcity for ourselves, we're actually doing the opposite of building wealth. We're starting to destroy wealth. And the worst thing that can happen when you invest in something you know very little about or why it would work and it works is you might get false confidence thinking that you
mm,
had something more to do with it than you actually did. That happened to me early on. I just drove with my wife last week, 3.5 hours, and we drove by the first home I ever bought when I was 19 years old. I was just about to turn 20, but I bought this townhome. It's like $96,000 back then. And I sold it for 175,000. I had nothing to do with that appreciation. It just went up in
yeah.
value because of timing, just the date I was born and when I happened to buy it. Second deal I did, I made 400% over 3 months on lending money, getting the money back. The third deal, I put no money down, sold the property, split the equity for the person that bought it from me because they were renting from me, made 90 grand. So the first three deals were these like really amazing deals. And so in my new money mind, I was like, I should do 100 of these. But
Mm,
I didn't have the tools, the due diligence, the patience, the wherewithal. And so what happened was I overextended myself. And there were quarters where my net worth went up over $1 million. And I thought, I'm amazing. This is such a good plan. I'm willing to deal with these phone calls and managing these people and closing on these deals and working on all the financials to get the loans and being high leverage. I even got into a development deal where I bought something out of bankruptcy and built a fourplex. And it was like it just took so much time that I could have been with my children. I could have been reading. I could have been writing. I could have been speaking. I could have been doing a number of things that I truly enjoy and love.
mm,
But I bought into this system that investments are outside of myself and that you make money and then you store your money in real estate. That might be right for some people, but it might be completely against your investor DNA because risk isn't in the investment. There's good investors and bad investors. And so if I'm investing in things I don't know, that's a bad investment for me because I'm taking on too much risk. I'm outside of my sphere of influence. I have very little control. And so it was an expensive lesson.
yeah, some of the best lessons are expensive, though I find. Um, you talk a lot there about investing in yourself. So but I imagine you are invested in things that are outside. I mean, are you only investing in the stuff you love to do? Because I think if I if I was only invested in stuff I love to do, it would limit what I invested in.
Well, I do invest in, I do really invest. I wouldn't, okay, so where I store money, this is hard to call it an investment because it's not cash
Mm,
flowing.
mm,
But I have three properties and they're all very hard properties to acquire.
mm,
Two of them are on a river. One of them's got the best view where I live. I could see both
mm,
mountain ranges, the whole valley.
mm,
They were hard to acquire, and all they are is an inflation hedge and a lifestyle gain. So
mm,
it's just a place to store and build when there's inflation. The second
mm,
thing is I own Bitcoin. I'm not saying everyone should, but for me, I like that it's decentralized. I like that it's deflationary. I just switched banks last week, and it's been a huge cumbersome problem. And some of the money doesn't show up for 3 days. My Bitcoin moves within minutes. Like
mm,
I do store some money in Bitcoin. Again, not my cash flowing assets. My cash flowing assets are the businesses that I have ownership in or I have equity in, or I simply have influence in with a revenue agreement because of the brand I built with things that I truly believe in that I feel serve humanity. And that's where I create my recurring revenue and my cash flow.
Mm.
Intellectual property with, I license out my content to other financial people. I have royalties that come in from that. It is active. It's not like it just automatically happens, but it's activity I want to do. And I feel like my vision's big enough because I want to liberate 1 million people to become financially independent. And I think that's a lifetime gig. And so I'm okay that my investments are things that I have to actively manage, because I think anything we don't monitor or maintain is anything we don't monitor, it's not going to maintain, and it's going to get sloppy. And so I just found that if I get beyond the sphere of influence, I get sloppy, and then it's hard to pay attention. I invested 25 grand, a small amount, into a startup last year, and I was like, why? Now I have to, now I get the documents I have to sign and read, and I don't control the business. And then, I
I know.
invested in,
Even if you double your money, like,
even if I've done my money, it's like I'd rather put it in places that I feel that
yeah,
like fulfillment instead of
yeah,
just the financial thing. I always look at it like money is a good companion. It's a terrible solo artist. So if I'm doing something only for the money, then it's going to drain my energy. It's going to be something that feels like something I have to do versus something I get to do. But if it's something that I get to use creativity and I get to create because I am entrepreneurial, and
mm,
it's hard to say no to things. But Warren Buffett said the difference between successful entrepreneurs and highly successful entrepreneurs is the successful ones say yes to too many things, and the highly successful ones say no to almost everything, but the things that are
mm,
perfectly aligned with their values. And he didn't invest in the .com bubble because he said it didn't make sense to him. And he's done pretty well. I think he gets like 24% a year. That's a pretty amazing return for as long as he's gone. So I try to say no more often, because when I said yes through all my 20s, it really cost me in my 30s to clean that up. And now that I'm in my 40s, I'm going, I want to be able to sit down with my wife. I want to be able to take a trip. I want to be able to do things that without having my mind sabotaged by having so much to manage.
yeah. It's a different value on your time. Um, but again, a lot of the people listening to this are at a very, very early stage. So, and I know you said at the beginning of this podcast that if you look back through
Yeah.
your parents and your grandparents, they didn't come from a lot of money. They went entrepreneurial. So, was it? What was that transition from you? I mean, is that just your DNA? Was that just your nature? Were you just a kid that goes, "This guy's going to be an entrepreneur"? What was that shift? And the reason I ask that is for people who are listening to this that may wish they could make that shift. How do you transition when you're in that environment? You're in an environment of scarcity and you want to transition to something else.
It was a hard shift. I mean, I think that my grandfather planted seeds, because my grandfather, although a coal miner, had two side businesses. He owned a TV
Mm,
repair shop. He repaired old Zenith TVs, and he had played the accordion. And he played in a band where they went and performed at weddings and events.
mm,
And so I would go ride around with him in his red van. When he'd go fix these TVs. People would give him homemade, tortillas, or he'd win
yeah.
community awards. And so I saw that little piece of entrepreneurship. But why I started to be an entrepreneur was because I used to, mow lawns, pull weeds, and get paid pennies on the I mean, just so little for some of these things. And it was grueling work in the sun. And I even worked at this dump site for a week where they were doing a grand opening, and I helped set up the tents and everything. And it was like pounding steaks in 105-degree weather. And I was like, this isn't for me. I don't want to do this
Yeah.
physical labor thing. But I played sports. And at 15, I was like, I want to make some money. And my parents were like, well, it's hard for you to get a job because first off, you're 15, second, you're playing sports, and we want you to get good grades. And I was getting good grades. And so we made a deal. My dad was bringing home coal mining vehicles that were the surface vehicles to clean when the bosses came into town. I'd help him clean them, and he'd give me some money for it. So then I went to my mom. I'm like, look, Monica, my friend, her dad runs the credit union you work for. What if I just start cleaning those vehicles they repossess? She goes, you can ask him. He said, yes. So I started cleaning those vehicles. And then my mom moved to the school district. So I went there and I said, hey, I could clean your car. I'm 16 now. I could bring it back to you by the time lunch happens or the end of work. And so I just had this car detailing business in the summer. And I started to be in these business competitions. I won $500 my first one when I was 15, but I only made 700 for the business. So one speech, $500, or just scrubbing tar and bugs off cars. And then the
So that was an aha moment for you.
Yeah, and I was scared to speak, man. That was the most. I was so nervous, but I told the joke. The judges laughed, and I took third place. I was like, "This is kind of cool." The next year, I took first place, and then the next year, I won it for the state, and it came with $5,000, which was again probably what my business had made at that time. And I was like, I kind of like this business thing. I don't like washing cars, but I blew out my knee, and I had to hire employees, and so I hired two employees. They washed cars while I sat and let my knee heal, and I was making money. And I was like, I want to kind of do this. So at 19 at 18, I was trying to invest the money, and I ended up getting offered an internship when I was 19 with one of these firms I was talking to. And so I was just peddling mutual funds and insurance, but that was like a little bit entrepreneurial because it was, I make whatever commission I make. And as I was starting to make good money, I made more than my professors. I remember I was like getting all these job offers. It was 99, the economy was strong, and I got an offer in an accounting firm. I didn't even know what they were talking about through the interview. I just am a good, interviewer. And so all my professors was like, you should take that job. But the dean pulled me aside. He said, nah, don't listen to them and what they're teaching you in school. Don't listen to them what they're teaching you in life. He's like, you've got something going here. You should really consider just sticking with it. And it was that one encouraging thing from Dean Templin that I was like, maybe I should. And I remember telling my family, and they were nervous. They're like, being in business for yourself could be a tough gig. Maybe that's what my great grandfather had to come to America because his business didn't work out. And so they remember that, he separated from his family for 7 years before he could afford it. So it's like a lot of those stories. But I had a professor that was an amazing professor. He was a money manager, managed $5 billion before he became a professor. Being a professor was his like third stage of his career. He's like, this is if I pay it forward, give it back. So I just started becoming friends with him, playing racquetball, working out with him, asking him questions. And I learned one strategy. And I was like, hey, I'd love to sit down and talk with you sometime about the strategy. And he liked the strategy and said, yeah, why don't I do this with you? And so I made, six figures just from that one transaction. I was a senior in college, and I said, all right, I'm gonna do this business thing. And I showed my grandfather the bank account, and he was encouraging and said, I'll be your client too. Became a client. And that was kind of what gave me just that encouragement. But it was like 6 months of depression. Like I'm like, I should take these jobs when I graduate. And I was like, I don't want to take these jobs. I mean, one was in Milwaukee, and when I went to interview, it was a blizzard. They were the second biggest fun family in the world, and I just didn't enjoy it. It was like all suits and ties, and they wanted me to go golf and take clients. I was like, that's just not my thing. I'm not a golfer. I retired from golf in Scotland with my dad in '06 because I asked the caddy, what club should I use? We're on the 10th tee. He goes, any should do. I mean, that's how bad I was golfing. He figured a putter would be as good as any because I was hitting the ball everywhere. I was like, it just wasn't me to go do those jobs. And even talking to my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife, I was like, what do you think about me working in Milwaukee? She's like, I think you should follow your dreams. Well, that really wasn't my dream. And I didn't know if she was going to come to Milwaukee with me. So I decided to go the entrepreneurial route. And it was just, the fortunate thing is I didn't have big bills. Like I was in a small town, and I had saved up some money, and I rented out my house to her and lived in her parents' basement while I got on my feet, and just had someone ask me to come and speak. I was still a senior in college, and they asked me to go speak to a financial firm. I was speaking about stuff I was reading and going to events and learning about. I'd never done it. And this guy comes up, he's like, my dad's about to retire and sell his business. I think what you're talking about would help him. Would you meet with us? So I go meet with him. It's like, let's meet with my attorney. So we meet with the attorney. The attorney just trashes me because I don't know what I'm talking about. But I was resourceful. So I just called the guy that wrote the article about this charitable trust thing. And he was like, how old are you? I'm like, I'm 21. He's like, I love it. You should come to the office. Let's talk. And this guy like worked on Frank Sinatra's estate, Walt Disney's estate, just like pumped me, filled with like confidence because he's like, this is amazing. We can help this guy out. No problem. Does the transaction, saves him hundreds of thousands of dollars. All of a sudden that starts spreading around. Other people start asking me to come help them out. And so I was just lucky and resourceful and willing to ask the questions, I guess.
And so, I mean, it's a great start, very entrepreneurial. You obviously had some success then, and then some failure.
Yeah.
At what point? At what point did you come up with this concept of the sacred cows, and what are they? I mean, at what point did you come up with this idea that sacred cows? I'm assuming there are things we believe, or society we've learned about money that you would question or think we should view differently. So what are the most important things that we should begin to reframe?
Well, I went to this event It was a 2-day event, and this older gentleman was teaching, probably in his 60s, and there's another young guy there, maybe like in his late 20s. I was in my very early 20s, and he kept debating the instructor. And it was winter. I remember he was in a Harley t-shirt, shorts, and flip-flops, and there was snow outside. I was like, this guy's crazy. So I just started talking to him, told him about this one thing I did with my professor. He's like, that's amazing. So he's like, let's just start studying together. So we got 4 guys together. We started a study group. People hear about the study group. They start asking if they could join. Within a year, we had 170 people come to our study group. We had to rent out this auditorium at a Marriott,
Wow.
and I wasn't charging for it, but I was leading it. So I would get up and speak and teach everything I'd learned, and then what would happen is people would come up to me on the breaks and say, "Hey, do you know about this strategy, or have you ever done this?" And I'm like, "No, tell me about it." And they're like, "Well, I got an account that says what you're talking about isn't real." I'm like, "Bring him, I'll debate him." And so I just started debating these guys in front of the room, and one of the accountants ended up leaving his firm and starting to do work with us. So it was a pretty fascinating situation. And then I was like, well, I should probably make some money from this. So I started letting these advisors. I'm probably 24 at the time. If you want to come see what I'm doing, you can shadow me for a day. So they just come watch me meet with clients 5 or 6 in a day. These guys are in their 40s. They're telling the client, yeah, we're just wanting to learn from Garrett. So now the clients are definitely going to work with me, because they're like, oh, this guy, really must be smart. And then I'd even run into him I remember I went to a movie with my parents, and one of the guys came up. He's like, oh man, your son's like what Tiger Woods is to golf, he is to finance. And I'm like, who are you? What is going on here? But it was just, I was willing to freely share and be abundant enough that they started to share, and I learned at an accelerated rate. And then they'd bring me, clients, and I'd work on with them, and they'd fill up my calendar. And that was kind of where I got that start, and it all started to work out. It was just, and the guy that started this with me, his name was Les. And we started this study group on one premise. We said, let's question everything. And we're not going to try to be right. We're just going to find out what's right. So if it's bad news, it's bad news. If it's something we're doing, we're just going to own it. And so we started with a qualified plan, like a 401k, retirement plan out of the United States. And we, first 30 minutes, were like, this might be the coolest thing ever invented. We're just, everything's checking the list. And then we just start doing more analysis. We start getting real numbers from the stock market versus, projected returns. And we start running Monte Carlo simulations, because I learned about those in econometrics in school. And we start seeing these plans aren't what we thought they were. And I mean, it was bad news for us, because we would make tens of millions of dollars selling these things. And now we're not going to sell them. We're going to start charging a fee that people pay us to work with, which is harder than money that automatically comes out of someone's account. And so I was like, I wonder what other sacred cows are out there. So I just started saying, let's look at everything that people say, this is what you have to do, never question it. And we just started making a list.
So just to clarify there, because certainly in Ireland and Europe, we don't have a
Yeah.
401k. So 401k is a pension plan.
Yep.
So is the 401k something that is invested for you by an insurance company or whatever?
So no,
And
what used to be, there was pensions in America, and
yeah,
you work somewhere, you get the pension, and the company
yes,
guaranteed the pension. And then the companies were
are
taking too
investing
much
that.
risk on the pensions, and the pensions went bankrupt. So one of the answers were, well, we'll just give you a matching fund, but you are responsible for your own. So you can put money in the plan, you can invest within certain funds inside of there. If they
Yeah.
perform great, if they don't, it's on you. So it was a way to kind of push responsibility, and they were very popular at the time.
But they weren't performing as good as just the simple stock market. Is that
Well,
what you're
part of
saying?
it's because there was a bunch of fees. There was a
Yes.
there
Yeah.
was
I
a
mean,
bunch
and
of
so
fees, and
it's
they weren't
similar over here. I
public,
mean, yeah,
right? They
yeah,
were just at the time there was no laws, so there were just these hidden fees. We found up to 13 fees that were undisclosed
wow.
because of a firm in Seattle that was an engineering firm, and then the laws changed and all this. But even with the law changes, they just delay your tax. They don't actually save you tax. You have to pay the tax on the back end. And we're like, well, that's kind of a problem. And when we looked at the 2% fee that most of these had, it was impacting 40% of their overall return, but nobody was showing that. They were just showing, well, the market's done 10%. And then we looked and we're like, well, the market hasn't really done 10% because some companies go out of business, and then that impacts your overall return, but they put a new company in there in the index, and that's not being accounted for. And volatility impacts it. If you have 100 grand, you lose 10%, you're at 90 grand, but you still have to pay your fees. So you're at less than 90 grand. If the market goes back up 10%, you're not back to 100 grand. You
Yeah.
lost the time. And so we just started to analyze that. And we were going to write a book.
And really understand what products people were buying.
Yeah, so we took 2 years of dissecting this from 2004 to
Right.
2006, and then we had this retreat with our whole firm, and we decided what's something we could all do together. And we decided a book was going to be the answer, and the team could help us with research, and they could help us with case studies and all this. And so everybody's excited. And we booked out the last 2 weeks of June of 2006. We were going to go to a hotel. We were just going to bunker. We were just going to like bunker down and just like write the outlines and start writing the book. And then June 9th, my partner died in a plane crash.
Wow.
So he dies. I'm overwhelmed for 4 months. Just, and it wasn't just him. There was 4 partners, 2 of them died. So we lose half of our partners.
Wow.
It's a plane crash. And I'm just trying to keep it together. And then finally, 4 months later, I take my first day off. I'd worked every day since they died, and it was taking it off for Thanksgiving. And on the drive, we were driving to my family's house. It was 2 hours. My wife just is quiet, and she's driving because I'm exhausted. I put on 25 pounds over the 4 months. I can't make a simple decision. And we're halfway through the drive, and the first word she said is, you're a really great businessman. You're an extraordinary businessman. Now, I thought she's making me feel better by saying it. And I was like, oh. Then she glances at our son in the back seat, looks at me and says, but you're just an ordinary husband and father. And I was quiet, man. I looked away, kind of got emotional, had to like swallow to choke back the tears. And by the time we got there, I was like, all right, I'm in office from home. I'm going to spend one more week at the office and let them know, like, hey, I'm not coming in for any of the month of December. I'm just going to be at home. If we got to do what we got to do. You guys are going to have to figure it out. I can't keep doing this. It's not healthy. I've got to focus on my family. And so I took some time to play with my son and, hang out. And what would happen is he'd take a nap. My wife would take a nap and I would be like, no, maybe I'll start that book. And so I just started writing. I called one of our clients. His name's Steven, and he'd been through everything we'd ever done. And he's much more well-read than I am. And, he'd written a little bit. And I was like, hey, I'm kind of scared to write. Like, I just don't know if I'm a good writer. Would you help me with this book? And so I hired him, and we just started talking. We started writing that book that month. And the crazy thing is we wrote the outline of the book in December and I'd kind of been writing for 2 years. I got 72 pages done in 2 years because I just could never find the time and didn't have enough purpose behind it. And then all of a sudden, by just taking care of myself and having more energy and, it just got excited and wrote it. And we probably had like 17 myths that we thought were valid, and then we combined it into 9, because some of them were enough related that we said, here's the 9 myths, and wrote the book. And it came out August of 2008, right when this great recession's happening. So the book took off because it was like prolific in saying everything that was going on and what to do differently. And so it really had kind of a life of its own and hit New York Times and as the first book. And I rewrote it in 2023, and I still can't believe I wrote that in my early 20s. It holds true. I've given it out to 23 billionaires over time. I've had one of them tell me it changed how they invest. I mean, but it also wasn't written for them. It was written for people like my family that just didn't know anything about money, And I was like, hey, this is what we're being told, but here's what I saw the wealthy do that we can all apply. There's some things wealthy do that people can't just go apply, but there's other things that we could do that will help us to get wealthier by just understanding what we've been told.
So what are the simple things that the wealthy do that the average person can do?
So the first thing is it begins with our mindset. Like, the wealthy don't look at the world in a finite pie zero sum game. Yet a lot of the people that are poor and middle class think if one person gets something, that's less for another. So they get in a mindset of take what you can, hold on to what you've got. They play not to lose. So it's not a game of value creation. It's a game of like preservation and protection at the expense of production. So by simply changing how they view is that dollars follow value. So you've got to learn how to create more value, which means you're worthy of investing in yourself to increase your skills. And then you increase the skills that matter. Communication, those are important skills. Financial IQ, those are important skills. And a lot of people think, well, when I'm done with school, I'm done with school. But no, that's just like you're at the starting line. And what's from there really matters a lot. And it's everything from emotional intelligence, it's building relationships, it's, and so once I saw that.
All that non-financial stuff, in fact, is what you're talking about,
Right.
is the ground rock to building the wealth.
Right, because I'll post videos about billionaires and I just get hate. People like billionaires shouldn't exist. And I said, well, what happens if someone creates $10 of value for an individual, but they
Mm.
only charge them a dollar. And they do that for a billion people. So they make $1 billion. We shouldn't allow them to do that. I mean, but they think so scarcely that they've taken too much. And it's kind of like when the printing press came out. Back in the 15th century, Gutenberg comes out with it, and people are like, we can't do this. Too many jobs will be lost. This will destroy the world. And the reality is, it democratized it. It made it accessible and available that knowledge, just like there's plenty of problems with having a smartphone, but one of the things that happen is more people have access to information. So they have, unfortunately, not always the best information, but they do have access to information, and it's made it where it's not so expensive. So these are the things that the wealthy understand is like the more value I create for someone, the more people I reach, the bigger the impact, the more dollars come. People that are poor middle class, they think time equals money and they trade their time for dollars and they never learn how to make those dollars work for them. And therefore, they're in a very limited, finite game where they think I'll just budget my way and I'll reduce my expense. But guess what? Wealthy people increase productive expenses. They hire people. They have a team. They invest in themselves. They grow their skill sets. They do those things where the poor and middle class think there's not enough to do that, not enough to go around. So they stay stuck in their mindset and in their ability, therefore limiting their wealth.
Yeah, this notion I can see now as you're talking about this notion of scarcity leads into so many things and how people live their lives. I know one of the things you talk about is living a rich life. I'd like you to explain that, but I'm imagining already that from your own life lessons, the rich life is not just about wealth; it's about looking at how wealth impacts in all areas of your life, or how you live every area of your life richly. Is that what you mean by that?
Totally. And I think that there's really 5 key areas for that. One is I think money is important. People that say that it's unimportant probably don't have much of it. Who needs unimportant things laying around? The
Yeah.
second thing, though, is purpose. And I think we're at a stage of life that if people don't find purpose, they're going to be especially afraid and especially terrified with AI because lack of purpose is very exhausting. It's very concerning. It's very boring. There's a lot of problems with it. The other thing is mindset. That's part of our wealth and living richly is that we can be abundant. We can have peace of mind, the things that you described early on. The next is our health. We've seen, especially like in America, man, it's like I saw stats that Americans are fatter than pigs now. Pigs are 15 to 20% body fat. It's like
Wow.
it's more like 25 to 40% average body fat here in America because they say they don't have the time or they don't have the knowledge. I mean, look, to be really healthy, I had to learn. I had to learn what types of foods are healthy. I had to learn what types of activities are good, including getting some sun, moving my body, and having some resistance training,
Mm.
getting enough sleep, letting go of stress and finding processes to handle stress so I don't internalize it and have that become an unhealthy situation, and having quality relationships. So that's the fifth thing is social life. Like some people think that they get addicted to the grind and then they don't relax and rejuvenate. When my partners died, I was exhausted and I was less productive, spending more time getting less done. So if you don't have an ability to have relaxation, rejuvenation, or recreation, then what happens is everything gets stifled creativity, productivity, enjoyment. And so all 5 of those things are part of our rich life. It doesn't mean all 5 are perfect. It just means that we're intentional about it and that we have depth. It means we have choice. We write the script. We don't let the world write the script because the world will just tell you more is better and you can never have enough. And that lie keeps people in dissonance so that they are enslaved to their work, they're enslaved to their career, they're enslaved to their money, and they don't have freedom.
One of my inspirations for starting this podcast and calling it The Inner Entrepreneur was because I mix with a lot of entrepreneurs. And I came across this very common theme of so many of them who are successful, who had built businesses, but had either messed up a lot of other areas of their lives or just were unfulfilled. And so their marriage, their relationship with their partner wasn't great, or the relationship with their children or their health, and it's like they'd focused on the area that is measurable, that everyone goes, oh, Garrett's wealthy because he has this number. Go, well, yeah, but let's look at all these other areas. And so you end up having these people we define as wealthy, but they're miserable human beings.
Yeah.
And I think that's enormously common.
Well, let me contrast two times in my life. Let's go back to July 3rd, 2006. I had gotten up in the morning, rode my bike to the gym, listened to this program by Joe Polish, and while I was at the gym, I got a text. Someone said, "Hey, I just sent Joe your book. He wants to talk to you." That's pretty cool. At the same time, before I got on the phone with him that day, I had to send $92,000 to Plan Television Arts, which is the PR firm for my book, which left me with minimal amount in my bank account because I had just been going through it on the real estate side. I'd had my first down year in business and it was really hemorrhaging. And so at the same time, later that day, we went to a barbecue with some friends. I was in the pool swimming with my kids, eating healthy food, felt really good. That night was with my family, watching fireworks and all these kind of things, staying at this little cabin. And so I thought about all the friends I had that day and had reached out to them and, just had some gratitude. So I had all these things going on in my life other than my finances. My finances were in dire situation,
Mm.
but I was launching Killing Sacred Cows. It was coming out in 2 months. These guys had the self-published version that I'd come out with the year before. And Joe helped me with 3 amazing relationships on the call that day. It was just like, I'm like, man, the financial piece isn't all the way there, but I feel really fulfilled and I feel really hopeful because I'm so on purpose and I know I've made some mistakes. I'm going to own those mistakes and I'm going to teach other people about these mistakes. Now in 2023, I just come off 2022 being a pretty fantastic year. I'd filmed a comedy special around money. I'd edited it with Marty Callner, who he brought in an editor that had won 2 Emmys that helped us out, one with Justin Timberlake, one with Chris Rock. Uh, you know, I don't know how many Emmys and Ace Awards and everything Marty had, but it's somewhere in the 30s. I mean, he did the first music video ever. I mean, some of the most epic videos we've ever watched, whether it was Cher's video where she was on the battleship, with
Right.
her butt hanging out. That was his video. Whether it was Tanya Katane dancing on a car for Whitesnake, that was his video. He had done Jerry Seinfeld. He won an Emmy with him. I mean, like I'm sitting here with one of the greats, and I'm a rookie comedian, and
Mm.
it was an amazing year. But then in 2023, I was like, I don't want to be a traveling comedian, and I'd sold my business, and I was in stage 4 kidney failure. So my bank accounts were full. Sold the business, everything's going well, but my health isn't there. I was really scared, depressed, in scarcity. So I had all the financial wherewithal, but I was missing the other pieces. I would rather be where I was in 2006 than where I was in 2023. The good news is my kidneys are doing well now. I love what I'm doing in my business, but it was a bit of a dip because I had insomnia, which you don't think clearly, or I didn't when I was like, am I going to die? Am I going to get a kidney transplant? It was just a dark place because I didn't have those other areas. My mindset was being impacted. I wasn't being very social because I didn't want to bring people down because I was trying to figure this out. My mindset, just all that. Like my purpose was limited. But now here we are in 2025. I've never been happier with my business. And it took getting through that dark time. It took really thinking about what I want to do for a living and what was the next chapter for me. And so it ebbs and flows, but just having money doesn't mean you have happiness. I do think it's really good at renting happiness. Like taking a trip is fun while you're on the trip. I think buying a new car is fun and then it wears off. I think, there's just certain things that it can rent, but for sustained happiness, I think it's finance, purpose, mindset, health, and it's also your social life. And if you can have quality in those 5 areas, even though there might be times where some are greater than others, then that's living a rich life. It's intentional. You write the script, you design the life, you create the life you don't want to retire from.
I think the greatest gift I experience from money is freedom, and it's the most valuable gift I have is to get up in the morning and go, what will I do today, as opposed to this is what I have to do today,
Get to versus
and
have to, right? That's such a different place.
it's it's just a different place to live from, and when you live there for a while, it you would no amount of money would make me return to a place where I didn't have that level of freedom. And I think that degree of financial freedom for some people, it doesn't require a huge amount of wealth. It requires you to think about what requires you to think about how you want to live your life. Um, I'd love you to. I know we're running out of time, and there's so much I could talk to you about. But I've heard you often tell the story of the Rockefellers and the Vanderbilts. Is it?
Yes.
So I just think that's such a great story and tells us so much about building wealth. Have you the time to share that story with us?
That the Vanderbilts, I mean, they were so wealthy when they just kept expanding their transportation empire that when Cornelius died, he passed on his money to his eldest son, who doubled the estate in 9 years, which meant they had more money than the US Treasury.
Incredible.
But that was the last time their wealth grew. It decimated and went to nothing. The last Vanderbilt family reunion is rumored to have no millionaires. Yes, there's Vanderbilt University, which they donated $1 million. And part of it's because Cornelius lived a pretty frugal life when you consider the amount of wealth he had. His heirs did not. They didn't have really a trust. They didn't have an infrastructure. So they built 10 mansions in Manhattan that don't exist there anymore. They used to own the breakers in Rhode Island. They don't. The Biltmore Estates in the Carolinas, those are all gone. They're not part of the Vanderbilt family stewardship any longer. And it's because they didn't really have any framework. And so they became really good at spending money, but not much else. Where if we contrast that with the Rockefellers, John D. Rockefeller, I mean, he's on now his sixth generation of passing on wealth. And it's because they set up trusts. And no one was just entitled to money in the trust. You had to be a productive member of society. And there's a lot of darkness if you read about the Rockefellers. I'm talking just financial structure here.
But there is in every,
Yeah.
generations.
I mean, they had a vice president of the United States. They had 3 senators. They had a president of Chase Bank. I mean, they've had some substantial influence and production. And so, they still have over $10 billion.
But it seems like so the word that jumped out there, probably the most important word here, is entitled. And I think that is the key thing, because the Vanderbilts became entitled to their wealth, and so they were no longer taking responsibility for caring for it or creating it. And if you're not caring for and creating wealth, and you don't value it, and you're only spending it, it will disappear.
They were
There's
given
just
this
no question
amazing
about it.
garden, and all they did was eat from it, and they didn't care for it. The weeds
They
grew,
didn't
everything is gone.
replant. Yes.
Where the Rockefellers, I mean, they had trusts, and they also bought life insurance so that every time someone was in their family had life insurance, so when they die, it helps replenish the trust. And they could use money from the trust, but they could pay it back and pay interest to their family, not to a bank. There's certain things, and then they looked at their family as an ongoing concern, like a religion or a business considers itself an ongoing concern. They have succession planning. They have symbols. They have rituals. They have traditions. These were all core things that the Rockefellers look at. They look at everybody that's in the Rockefeller family as an asset of the family. That's not only an asset because they're a human being with intrinsic value, but they're an asset as a potential person to come in and produce to grow that family's wealth over time. The Vanderbilts never had that conversation, although Cornelius was rumored to say, keep the money together as one of his last words. Well, they didn't keep the money together. They didn't have the infrastructure. They didn't have family retreats. They didn't create stewardship. They created an entitlement. And entitlement destroys wealth.
There's no doubt about that. I've witnessed that. Do you think that every family needs some? Well, I suppose what I'm thinking is you don't have to be the Rockefellers
Right.
to pass on values to your children, which is fundamentally what it comes down to, because you grew up in a situation where you had to create wealth yourself. Possibly your children will grow up in a situation where they might not have to if you allowed them, but most people I come across who have wealth go use it maybe to educate the children, and then go, okay, off you go, do your own thing now, because they know that's what really serves their children, as opposed to giving them money.
Yeah, I mean, I have a friend, Chris. Chris Smith says, "Hey, I give my kids what they need, but they have to pay for 50% of what they want, so they earn part of it." You know, and it's like, yeah, that's really smart. I love that. And I have another mentor, Rich Christensen, that created a thing called Legato, and it was all about the family retreat structure. He's raised 5 amazing children. They started businesses while they were teenagers. They had
Mm.
private victories where they hiked Mount Kilimanjaro as a family so that they would build confidence, not arrogance. And they had conversations around unconditional love when they were 8 years old. There's certain methodologies that people could employ. And if people get what the Rockefellers do, there's an entire legacy toolkit that helps them with the building blocks of legacy, which is, I believe, having a family constitution, which is what are the values that we want to pass down? What are the contributions we want people to make? But most importantly, what are the lessons that we learn so we don't have to repeat all the same mistakes? So everybody's
Yes.
just starting over. And, I'm still thinking through legacy. I have a 20-year-old and a 17-year-old. And, we're having conversations on a regular basis. I love it. They take half of their income, they put it into Bitcoin. So I just like that they're thinking that way. And I want them to find their own lives and careers. But if they want to be part of the business that I've started, I'm more than willing to have them be part of that business because I've taught them to be contributors. They're kind kids. They're my son's out digging holes in the yard right now with my father-in-law, because we just finished our yard and we're putting in a few extra little bells and whistles, and he'll learn that's not the hard work that he wants to do, but he's willing to do, right? So there's just lessons along the way. Every quarter we take a trip as a family where we have conversations in the car ride, or we fly somewhere that's not too far away, and we have a little retreat. We do family meetings. We have conversations about, we have a family crest. We had family rituals when they were young. When we start the day, what are they grateful for? What's the intent for the day? What beliefs do they want to reinforce? At night, my wife would say, what was the best part of your day? What was the worst part of your day? What did you learn? And so it's just, these rituals make a big difference because it's how we invest in our heirs.
Well, these rituals are how you're passing on values to your children, and what you said about your kids there to me is that they're contributors, and bringing your children into your family business or into your wealth or whatever, as long as they're contributing, because I think if they don't contribute, you end up like the Vanderbilts and losing it, but
Yeah.
also contribution gives you self-esteem and self-worth, and then they begin to realize, oh, I've learned from my dad and now I can go and do it myself, which is a whole different ball game than going, I'm living off my dad, because that just destroys your
Right. My
self-esteem.
youngest son's an amazing comedian. When he was 13, he opened for my comedy special and he did great. And he was a
Wow.
natural at it, but he doesn't want to pursue it. So I don't push it. I let him choose.
Yeah.
I tell him it's like an amusement park. I want you to try a bunch of different rides and then figure out which one is your career, find out which one works for you. But you got to put yourself out there, figure out your path. I'm willing to help in any way that I can, but I'm not willing to hand it, because if I do, then you'll never enjoy it and you'll always feel like you're beholden to me.
Well, that's great advice there, Garrett. We've touched on so many things in this conversation. So, I would just encourage people to reach out and search your content, because a lot of the things you've touched on, I've heard in much greater detail on YouTube, etc. So, where can people find you?
Yeah, if they go to Instagram, Garrett B Gunderson, B as in boy, Garrett B Gunderson, and if they put inner entrepreneur in the DM, I'll give them What Would the Rockefellers Do audiobook, since we just talked about it, so they could hear about that story and a lot of the legacy infrastructures. And I think that
Brilliant.
it works mostly worldwide. There's a few nuances that are really U.S. and Canada, but I think the philosophies are what's key inside of there. I have a YouTube channel. Garrett.live in any internet browser will take you there, or Garrett Gunderson TV when you get to YouTube. I do a long form video every week and kind of draw things out. So I think that might be helpful as well. And I have a website, GarrettGunderson.com. I personally write blogs every week or every other week. I just enjoy the process of writing. They're pretty deep, heartfelt, and I ask a lot of questions in them so people could apply the lessons to their own life.
Well, I would encourage people to check it all out, and I will put all the links in the show notes so people can find you. And I know that there's a lot of value there. So, Garrett, it's been an absolute pleasure, and
Thanks.
thank you
Really
for coming
enjoyed
on the
this.
podcast.
Thanks, Paul. I appreciate you doing this.